Blog Talk Radio.
You are listening to the Pro Football Podcast Daily here on Blog Talk Radio. Here is your host, Mike Noto.
And welcome to the Pro Football Podcast Daily, Episode 1 here on Blog Talk Radio. I'm your host, Mike Noto, and guys, this is the first episode of the Pro Football Podcast. Some of you, if I know, followed me over from YouTube, from my sports news analysis YouTube channel. Thank you for following me over. If this is your first time listening to me, welcome. And as always, feel free to join the conversation. You can hit me up on Twitter at ProFootballPod. You can hit me up on email, profootballpodcast@gmail.com, or obviously feel free to call in as well. And I'll give you guys an idea of what I plan on doing here with this podcast since it is the first one. Basically, I plan on talking about all 32 teams Monday through Friday on a nightly podcast. So if you're an NFL junkie like myself, you're still into it just as much in the off season, you want to hear the latest analysis and opinion of your favorite team, be sure to subscribe and be sure to check out my podcast here again on a nightly basis on Blog Talk Radio. And, we'll be doing analysis and opinion of every team, the issues of the day, the major stories of the day. I always hit you guys with a trivia question towards the end of the show, and I'll answer it the next night. So, I'm always interested in hearing what people have to say, always looking for that local insight that you have to your favorite team that could, further my football knowledge and give me a better perspective on what's going on in your neck of the woods. But every night I'll start with the daily highlights from around the NFL. The top stories, if you will. And today, topping the stories for me is the story of Titus Young. If you remember Titus Young, he was a second-round pick of the Detroit Lions 2 years ago. He was thought to develop, at least, into the second receiver alongside Calvin Johnson. Although Titus Young had some good moments as a Lions receiver, his tenure with them was marred by off-the-field troubles, on-the-field troubles, and just overall as a guy that was tough to deal with. And, the Lions made the decision to release him last year, and he was in the news again recently because he got arrested twice within a 15-hour span. The first of those arrests came over the weekend on a DUI charge. And then after the DUI charge, they impounded his car. He got arrested again for trying to break into the impound lot and break out his car that got taken from him, obviously, when he got booked for the DUI. So, just the trouble continues for Titus Young. I think now it's not even about football for him. It's about him going and getting the help he obviously needs to get his life back together. He's still a young man, so, hey, look, he's not in many people's eyes, he's probably a lost cause, and the people he's burned and the Lions fans he's burned and the organization, I could see them thinking that. But the fact of the matter is he's a young man still. He can still salvage some kind of life for himself, and you hope he realizes that and/or has someone that could kind of steer him in the right direction and get him help. Because, again, the NFL is probably the longest thing from his mind right now as he tries to, or hopefully tries, to get headed in the right direction. Some other top stories coming from the NFL today. Ronde Barber, the veteran cornerback from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, is going to call quits. He's going to retire after 16 seasons. Ronde Barber, most consecutive starts by a defensive back with 215. The question with Ronde Barber now will become in the coming days in NFL circles, certainly in Tampa Bay Buccaneers circles with their fans and so forth, is Ronde Barber a Hall of Fame player? I happen to not think he's a Hall of Fame player. I know there's a tendency to think, you don't think he's any good? No, it's not that I don't think he's any good. I think he's a very solid player, obviously an integral part of the Super Bowl champion team there with the Buccaneers. So I'm not diminishing his on-the-field production. It's just when I think of Hall of Famers, I think of the guy, and if I don't think he's a Hall of Famer right away, and if I have to talk myself into it, I err on the side of saying he's not a Hall of Famer. Nothing against Ronde Barber. He's a great player. He's certainly a Tampa Bay Buccaneers Hall of Famer. He was certainly a wonderful player. I would have liked to see him play in that new revamped secondary they have this year, certainly with Jonathan Banks, the rookie corner they drafted, the Darrelle Revis acquisition, and also the free agent signing of Deshaun Goldston at safety to go along with Mark Barron, last year's first-round pick. I would have loved to see, Barber mentor a guy like a Jonathan Banks, but nonetheless, Barber makes the decision to retire. It was fun watching him during his career. Be interested to see what Buccaneers fans and NFL fans think as far as, do you think he's a Hall of Famer? Am I off? Is he a Hall of Famer? Let me know. At Pro Football Pod. Hit me up. Guys, some of the other story that seems to not be going anywhere is this Jets quarterback situation. And, they have 5 quarterbacks right now on their roster. It's been well publicized. That quarterback battle is going to come down to 3 guys. It's going to come down to David Garrard, Geno Smith, and Mark Sanchez. This story was in the news again today because a couple of NFL executives and scouts, of course anonymous. It seems like anything ever said in connection with the Jets whatsoever is anonymous, but that's another story for another day. Anonymous sources, though, say that they give Garrard the leg up in this quarterback competition. And, I think if Garrard gets this job, it's going to be because the other 2 guys perform so poorly in the offseason program and in training camp. Because let's face it, Garrard doesn't come in as priority number 1, option number 1, or the future of the franchise. I like David Garrard, but he's 35 years old. He's had back and knee problems in recent years. In my mind, the Jets took a chance on him. So if all fails, if Geno Smith isn't ready, if Mark Sanchez underwhelms from a leadership and a production standpoint in training camp, start the season with David Garrard. And you know what? If he doesn't start the season, you have a capable backup, a steady veteran presence there to back up either Sanchez or Smith, something the Jets haven't had in years past and something they desperately needed looking back on it, probably in the beginning of Sanchez's career, to give him a little bit more of an incentive and someone sort of chasing him down. It's always good for athletes to have that feeling that they always have to come in and compete every day. And, you take this competition apart and you look at now next Geno Smith. And Geno Smith signed a 4-year, he'll be slotted at about a 4-year, $5 million deal based on where he got picked in the draft. Janoris Jenkins was the 36th pick last year. That's what he got. Geno Smith will get a similar salary. So given that's the case and he was taken in the second round, there's no pressure on Geno Smith to start right away. I think if you see Geno start right away, it's because he absolutely wowed this coaching staff in mini camps and in training camp. But I hope people don't get down on Smith if he doesn't start from day one, because to be honest, I don't think that's a necessity for him. I don't think, if you see him not start on day one, it doesn't mean he's never going to be a good quarterback. It just means he's not ready yet. And, as far as Sanchez goes, Sanchez is going to have to come in, not only perform well on the field, but gain the trust and leadership aspect back from his teammates if he ever had it at all. He's going to have to show more commitment than he has in the past, more production than he has certainly the last 2 years. And with that contract he's making, $8.5 million guaranteed, Woody Johnson, a guy who doesn't like to waste money, his optimum I think, and I don't know how the GM or the coach feel, but Woody's opinion seems to prevail there. I think he'd like to see Sanchez start with Garrard waiting in the wings, if something should go wrong or if they start to tumble again. And then the future, the 2014 quarterback of the New York Jets, will be Geno Smith, certainly, I think. But we'll see how this plays out. And one thing about this quarterback controversy, it'll be publicized. None of this news will sneak up on us regarding the Jets. And it's just the way their organization is right now. It's a little bit dysfunctional. Hopefully it heads in a different direction with new GM John Idzik. The next, as far as some more highlights here, there's a cluster of injuries that were in the news today. And I thought I'd put them sort of under one heading or topic, if you will. And the first one of those injuries that, I know I'm concerned about, and I think Texans fans should be concerned about, is that hip surgery, that Ed Reed had recently. And you get a guy in Ed Reed who's a veteran. He's a proven veteran, a proven winner, if you will. By all accounts, a good guy, a good locker room guy. But his first now snapshot or, what the fans get from Ed Reed when they sign him is you sign the guy to a 3-year deal, an older player, and now he has hip surgery in very short order after he signs that new contract. Not a good sign. Certainly not a good sign For the owner, Bob McNair, who was reported to push for this signing, certainly not a good sign for Wade Phillips, who came out and was concerned, obviously as he should be, with a safety, free safety at that, having hip concerns. Definitely not a place you want to be this time of year as you're sort of ramping up the NFL schedule. And I think it's cause for concern. And I think there was now something to those rumors where, the Ravens, it was rumored after Reed signed with the Texans that the Ravens never even wanted to sign him. And maybe this is an indication as to why. The Texans' AFC rival, the Patriots, also in the news for some injuries today. You saw the news regarding Julian Edelman in a walking boot still. And Edelman's a guy that he was supposed to take the next step forward this year. You look at him and Danny Amendola as sort of, I think, together taking over that Welker role. There's no way either one of these guys can duplicate what Welker did on their own, but I think the hope was that they split the role and maybe make up for most of the production that Welker left behind. But with Amendola and with Edelman, you get guys who have had injury concerns. And if I'm a Patriots fan, I have no confidence that these two can even stay healthy for a whole season. Never mind reach the production that a guy like Wes Welker gave you, certainly. And the other, maybe the highest profile injury in the league here is the other Patriots injury issue, that to Rob Gronkowski, who is rumored to be having maybe his fourth surgery on that wrist. And you look back on it, and this is a guy who was on the extra point block team, and that's how this whole wrist nonsense started, and it's just gotten worse. He had surgery. Now that plate that was put in was infected. So it's just a continuous drama here with Gronkowski's wrist. And he's another guy. I hate to keep on bringing up Welker, but it's a big deal. They can't afford him to miss time, for Hernandez to miss time, because Welker picked up that slack last year when these two guys were hurt. So definitely a situation to monitor there. The injuries to Edelman and Gronkowski. And if you're a Patriots fan, I'd love to hear how concerned you are about not the production aspect replacing Welker, but the health aspect. Will these guys even be on the field? And is it a concern for you? The 49ers guard, Mike Iupati, certainly, if you're a guy who likes watching the trenches, a guy that's a joy to watch. He was an all-pro guard this year for the 49ers on that stellar offensive line that they have. They faced the most 8-man fronts of any team in the league last year and still put up those rushing stats, with obviously Frank Gore leading the way. Mike Iupati had shoulder surgery, but will be back for training camp. So good news for the 49ers there. The Lions, Darius Slay, if you remember, the Lions drafted him at the top of day 2 there. A bit of surprise, Darius Slay from Mississippi State being drafted ahead of his teammate Jonathan Banks, who we talked about a little bit before. But, the Lions, Darius Slay got injured at some point during the pre-draft process. That led to him getting his knee scoped the other day. The Lions were supposedly knew about this pre-draft injury. It's just a knee scope. He's supposed to be ready for training camp. And let's face it, the Lions fans and Lions organization, you're depending a lot on Darius Slay to sort of be that last piece of a revamped secondary that included the acquisition of Glover Quinn this offseason. You still have Chris Houston at one corner, Slay at the other, and, of course, Louis Delmas at that other safety position. And he needs to be a starter, so he needs to get up to speed pretty quickly here if he is going to miss the rookie camp and maybe even OTAs. The last injury concern, in my mind, Evan Mathis, the left guard from the Eagles. Now, Mathis, again, had a surgery, ankle surgery, expected to be back for training camp. And you might say, hey, look, Mike, this guy was the only consistent starter on that Eagles line last year. Why would he be a concern? I think for Eagles fans, it is a little bit of a concern because you went through all these issues last year with the injuries on the offensive line, and now your one constant from last year has surgery and is out, the entire until training camp, learning that new Chip Kelly offense, having to be in a certain shape physicality-wise to play in it. He's going to miss all this time here with the bum ankle. Mathis will be at that left guard spot. Harrimans will kick into right guard. And, of course, you have Lane Johnson and Jason Peters at the tackle spot. But that's the only reason it would concern me, to be honest, as an Eagles fan, is because of what they went through last year with that banged-up offensive line. The last team I want to cover here in the highlights section of the program is the Jacksonville Jaguars. And, it's very rare that the Jaguars will be in this section of the program, most likely, at least when the season starts, right? Because they're not expected to really overwhelm this year. I'm on record on my YouTube channel, which is Sports News Analysis. That's the name of the channel there, guys, if you want to go check it out. I'm on record saying I'm totally on board with the David Caldwell and Gus Bradley signings. I think this organization is headed in the right direction. I think they took another step in that direction by signing Marcus Trufant. And you might say, hey, he's a veteran guy. Why is that such a good signing? Look, he knows Gus Bradley's defense inside and out. He played 4 years under Bradley with the Seahawks. He played in 2 different positions in that defense with the Seahawks. He can implement Gus Bradley's program, most importantly, the attitude Bradley wants to bring. And although Bradley, obviously with guys like Browner and Sherman in Seattle, he likes those big physical corners. Although Trufant isn't that, you'll probably see him start week 1 opposite Dwayne Gratz, the rookie from UConn, who is in that big physical Browner, Sherman type mold. So I like that signing, Marcus Trufant. And lastly, a little bit of a fantasy twist on things here is the David Caldwell, the GM, coming out today and saying that Denard Robinson, who is now going to still have to be transitioned to an athlete-type player, running back type in the NFL, of course, the standout quarterback from Michigan. Caldwell said that he expects Robinson to get 10, 15 touches a game in that Jaguars offense. And, that raised some eyebrows. I know certainly for me, and if you're a fantasy football player, I expected Justin Forsett to be that main backup to certainly Maurice Jones-Drew, a guy you might, and Forsett, a very good backup running back at that, a guy I put it as one of the best backup running backs in the league. But now with this news that Robinson may get 10, 15 touches a game, you'd have to figure some of those touches at least are going to come from Forsett. And definitely a situation to monitor here as you go on if you happen to own Maurice Jones-Drew in a franchise-type league or if you draft him in your upcoming fantasy drafts this summer. So, guys, those are the top stories from today. What I'm going to do every day now is go division by division and discuss your favorite team, some analysis and opinion of some news stories that have surrounded them the last couple days or today as well. And then we'll go from there and get right into our trivia question here. But we'll start off in the AFC East with the Miami Dolphins. And it came out today that a lot of people are expecting Dion Jordan to only be a pass rusher his rookie year. I would find it hard to believe that the Dolphins would trade up for Dion Jordan to the number 3 pick and only use him in pass rushing situations, because I think eventually they're going to want him to be a 3-down linebacker. And the only way he's going to get better at that is by getting game reps. So I think you'll see him play the outside linebacker spot in the early downs, and then maybe kick into a defensive end spot on a pass rushing down so he can get his hands in the ground to go after the quarterback. I don't really agree with some of the reports I read today that said he's only going to be a 1-down linebacker his whole rookie year. I think they're going to integrate this guy in the every down defense right from the start. I don't know if I'm off on this Dolphins fan, so let me know if I am. The other situation regarding the Dolphins today is the left guard spot. Richie Incognito and his $4 million salary, or Dallas Thomas. That's a decision that the Dolphins are going to have to make. Dallas Thomas is an excellent fit for the scheme the Dolphins run. There's no doubt about that. Incognito is a veteran Miami Dolphin, but he is making that $4 million a year. Do the Dolphins take a little bit of a risk and cut the veteran for the rookie and save some money? Or do they stick with the veteran Incognito with the thinking that, hey, we're trying to win this year, let's go get it? Definitely a situation to monitor if you're a Dolphins fan. The Buffalo Bills, the last sort of AFC team we have to discuss today, and C.J. Spiller. He's again, from a fantasy standpoint, he's a guy that doesn't perplex me. It perplexes me the way the Bills have used him in recent years. I think he's a fantasy star waiting to explode. He had some games where he exploded even last year. And it remains to be seen, though, what's his true fantasy value and his value as an every down back if E.J. Manuel starts at the quarterback position. I think there's no doubt, in my mind at least, that E.J. Manuel will be the quarterback of your Buffalo Bills next year. They draft him 16 overall. In this day and age in the NFL, if you get drafted in the top 20 and you're a quarterback, you're more than likely starting week 1. And, you got Doug Marrone coming in with Nathaniel Hackett, the tandem from Syracuse. And I think from day one, again, you're going to see E.J. Manuel as the quarterback. And I'm not sure yet how that's going to affect Spiller's value. Is it going to make him more valuable because of E.J. Manuel's dual threat ability? Or is it going to make him less valuable because maybe the thinking is E.J. Manuel might have a pretty rough rookie season and all the focus will be on a C.J. Spiller. So remains to be seen. But something to think about if you're a Bills fan or if you're a fantasy owner thinking of maybe drafting C.J. Spiller. Let's transition now to the AFC North and with the Super Bowl champion Baltimore Ravens. Look, the Ravens acquired Rolando McClain from the Raiders. They signed him at a contract where it's very prohibitive for them. Not prohibitive for them, sorry. They can release him, no harm, no foul type of contract. He was arrested a couple weeks ago, again in his hometown in Alabama, Decatur, Alabama. You would think there'd come a time where he'd stop going back there because it seems like whatever trouble he gets in, if you read the charges that he's gotten levied against him, throughout his lifetime, most, if not all of them, have come by visiting his hometown. But, they have Rolando McClain still on the roster. They haven't committed to either keeping him and they haven't cut him yet. Do they need to keep him? Should they release him? If they release Rolando McClain, you're looking at Albert McClellan and Arthur Brown, who they drafted to play that position. Can they survive with those two guys? Do they need to keep Rolando McClain? Eric DeCosta, the assistant GM for the Ravens, was non-committal on that today. I think you see them go into training camp with McClain. If they like what they see out of McClellan and Brown, I think you see them cut Rolando McClain unless he absolutely knocks their socks off and plays great and has shown mostly that his attitude has changed. You go from the Ravens, who I think did better in the offseason than most people thought they were going to do at the beginning, to the team who I think has done an excellent job this offseason in that division, and that's the Cincinnati Bengals. And the Bengals, people forget, this is a team who's made the playoffs 2 years in a row. They re-signed a lot of their own guys this offseason, which is not fancy. But look, they feel they have a young, good team on the rise, and they want to keep the core of that team together. And frankly, I don't see anything wrong with that. And they needed a safety coming into the draft. They got an excellent safety to complement Reggie Nelson and Sean Williams. Sean Williams, little background, he's from Georgia. They drafted him in the 3rd round, the 84th pick overall. And, it seems like the Bengals, in comparison to what they were at the beginning of Marvin Lewis's tenure, that they're really trying to find guys that fit their system from both a X's and O's point of view and a temperament and attitude point of view. So you get in Sean Williams. First of all, a good run defender to complement Reggie Nelson, who's strong in pass coverage. You get a guy in Sean Williams who was, by all accounts, the leader of that defense at Georgia, a very intelligent player, a guy who seems to always do the right thing, a leader. And I love that pickup of Sean Williams. I think he's going to fit in great. And I think he'll fit in seamlessly, most importantly, to a defense that brings a lot of guys back. So love that move. Just wanted to mention it and talk about it, see what the Bengals fans thought of Sean Williams, coming back to their team. And the Steelers, of course, going through some changes this year. I think you'll see a different kind of offensive mentality from them. I think you'll see that through a guy like a Marcus Wheaton, who I think was a good draft pick for them. But I also think you'll see Le'Veon Bell featured quite a lot. And you may be looking at him developing into that maybe rare every down back in the NFL. Maybe not this year, okay? But certainly in years to come, he's very accomplished as a pass catcher and also as a blocker in the passing game. And obviously he showed at Michigan State that he can shoulder a workload from a conventional running back standpoint. And I think sometimes when we evaluate the draft, we look a little too far into things. And I think we're going to look back at Le'Veon Bell. I know he went higher than a lot of people thought, but even slipping to the position he did as being a real big steal here by the Steelers, no pun intended. And I like their first 2 draft picks as a side note. I like Jarvis Jones and the pick of Le'Veon Bell. Rounding out the AFC North here is the Browns. And look, the main question surrounding the Browns is you could talk about their quarterback situation. You could talk about first-year coach Rob Chudzinski. How's he going to, acclimate to his new job? You can talk about the implementing of the new defense there as well with Ray Horton. Well, look, the bottom line with the Browns right now is it starts at the top with that ownership situation. And Jimmy Haslam's company, Pilot Flying J, obviously under investigation, been well publicized by the FBI. How is that going to affect the running of the organization? Haslam says it's not going to affect it at all. There's been a lot of NFL sources, of course unnamed, saying that they foresee this affecting the franchise a lot. We'll see how this plays out. But you got a Browns who started new. The guy buys the team for $1 billion, and now, he finally gets his guys in place, coach and GM, and Joe Banner, the president. And, we get news like this for the Browns and the fans who, I know several Browns fans. They're good fans. And I just hope they either get a new owner in there right away or Haslam solves whatever legal problems he has, and it doesn't now put this organization in even more of a tailspin than it has been in for about the last decade. Last 2 divisions here in the AFC South and the AFC West. The AFC South, not much going on with the Colts, but a little nugget came out today that I found interesting, and that was the market for Goster Cherilus, in the free agency period. He's a guy, if you ask Detroit Lions fans, most of them that I know thought he had a pretty good year last year, but as a whole, his time with the Lions was very disappointing. And with the market not being very fruitful for a lot of guys in free agency, I was surprised to see the Colts give Cherilus the money that they gave him via free agency. But then you hear today that the Dolphins were also very interested in Cherilus and preferred him over obviously like a guy like a Tyson Claybo that they signed or an Eric Winston. And I don't know if I'm missing something, but Cherilus seemed to be very underwhelming during his time with the Lions. And just wondering what separates him from a guy like a Claybo, a guy like an Eric Winston, who it seems like, I know Claybo signed, but it seems to be a very limited market for those guys. And, again, just something that caught my interest. Want to hear what you guys think about that. Last AFC South little nugget for you is the Tennessee Titans, and more in particular Delanie Walker. Delanie Walker, of course, the tight end who will replace Jared Cook in that Titans offense. He is going to, thought to be step into that number 1 tight end role. And is he ready for it? That's the question I have for Titans fans, for 49ers fans who saw him play, or just in general for NFL fans. Is Delanie Walker ready to be that number 1 guy? Is he going to be a dependable enough pass catcher? It seemed as though he had it's well documented actually. He had a lot of drops last year, not many targets at all. Were his drops and was his inconsistency in the passing game from not being targeted a lot? Was it from his quarterbacks maybe not delivering the ball? Or is the fact of the matter he needs to get a little bit better as a pass catcher? I think we'll see that sort of develop here. But, again, Delanie Walker, a guy maybe you have on your radar as a fantasy tight end. What do you guys think of his future here in Tennessee? Let me know. The AFC West, the last division here in the AFC that we're going to cover here in our division notes. And the Broncos, the Broncos probably have to make a decision after drafting Monty Ball on cutting one of their running backs from last year, whether that's Noshawn Moreno or Willis McGahee. And there's some debate amongst Broncos fans, and I'm certainly, I bet you, the front office, in who do we keep? Do we keep McGahee, who's 32, who makes more money, but is probably more of a steady veteran presence and maybe a little bit more of a well-rounded back? Or do we stick with Moreno, a guy who had a good second half of the year last year, makes less money, and is 26 years old? And I think in the end, you'll see them err for Moreno because it would really buck a lot of trends for them to let go of a guy who's younger, who had a good end of the season, and who makes less money. I think McGahee will latch on with another team certainly as he sort of revived his career after leaving Buffalo with the Ravens and, of course, with the Broncos. But I think if they have to make a choice, you see them go with the combination of Moreno and Monty Ball in that backfield this year. The Oakland Raiders, they've done a lot to improve their team this year. I didn't think they got enough when they traded back to the 13th pick with the Dolphins this year. I didn't think they got enough in return. But they did in the second round get Menelik Watson, the tackle from Florida State. And I said when they drafted him, I still believe that, although I've read some stuff to the contrary. I think he's a plug-and-play guy from day one in that Raiders offense. Number one, because I think they lack talent as a whole on their roster, and I think he's just better. But more specifically, he really fits, from everything I'm reading and seeing from him as a player, fits that power blocking scheme they're going to implement better than anyone they have on their roster. So if the guy is better from a athleticism standpoint, better from a pure talent standpoint, and better from a scheme standpoint, I think it's a no-brainer. You see Menelik Watson as that starting right tackle on day one for the Oakland Raiders. The last two teams here. First, the Chiefs. The Chiefs, this Brandon Albert saga, I'm sure, is sort of lingering a lot more than fans, Brandon Albert, and the organization wants it to. But you have Albert now in the news again today because of Scott Pioli, obviously the former Chiefs general manager, their personnel man, who now works at the NFL Network, coming out today and saying they tried to negotiate a long-term deal with Brandon Albert last offseason and basically got nowhere because in Pioli's opinion, his camp was asking for too much money. And, you wonder, the market was a lot different last year for veteran players than it is this year as far as dollars being handed out. And without knowing the specific figures, because Pioli didn't mention them obviously, did Brandon Albert lose a lot of money by not taking that extension last offseason? You would think he did. We'll see what kind of contract he ends up with long-term, whether it's with the Chiefs or whether it's with a trading partner with the Chiefs. But again, case of maybe getting a little bit overzealous and a little bit too greedy here. And maybe looking back, Albert should have, if he wants to be in Kansas City, should have signed that extension last season that Pioli talked about today. Again, we don't know the figures, but sounds like he could lose some money on the deal. The last AFC team for today is the San Diego Chargers. The Chargers, any news about Manti Te'o is going to be the news of the day probably for the Chargers. And Tom Telesco is going around doing interviews on the radio just like a lot of GMs are. And he said today what many people thought is, you may not see Manti Te'o on third downs. You may not see him in passing situations just yet, but he was very stern in saying, and very decisive in saying, he envisions Te'o as a third down linebacker, a three-down linebacker, I should say, eventually. And those were the questions surrounding Te'o during the draft. He made a lot of good plays in pass coverage at Notre Dame, but I think a lot of those he had less of an opportunity of being exposed from an athleticism standpoint, certainly while he's at Notre Dame in comparison to what he'll face in the NFL. And I think that's what you're seeing, Telesco probably focusing on here when he says that Te'o will not probably be a three-down player in his first season with the Chargers. Guys, that's our AFC notes for today. Nothing really crazy. I mean, some of those top stories are pretty interesting. I think I went over, but we'll transition now into the NFC, and more in particularly the NFC East. And the NFC East, always a lot of drama, it seems, surrounding this division. Some of the bigger market teams reside here, and the biggest market team maybe of all is the Dallas Cowboys. And the Cowboys drafted Terrence Williams from Baylor in the third round. And, where does he fit now? Does he get slotted into that starting lineup opposite Des Bryant? And do we see Miles Austin kick inside to a slot? I think that's what you're going to see eventually. I'm not sure if he'll start the season. That's tough to throw a guy, a rookie, as the starting wide receiver
on the Dallas Cowboys, opposite Dez Bryant and into that pressure cooker on a team that's going to be expected to win now. I think you'll see Dwayne Harris start the season as the starter. I think you'll see Terrence Williams get implemented as the season goes on. He averaged over 18 yards a catch in college, which is just an outright gaudy number. And, I think eventually what Tony Romo, how he would succeed the most is you have Dez Bryant and Williams on the outside. Miles Austin slides into that slot position. And then you have not only Jason Witten, who had over 100 catches last year once again, but you also have Gavin Escobar, the rookie they drafted, if nothing else than for a red zone sort of safety net for Romo. And, I think optimally that's where the Cowboys want to go here when you talk about their long-term and long-range plans for that offense. And, look, I don't know if they did much to address that offensive line, if that's going to get much better. But, I think they definitely replenished those skill guys here with the additions of Williams and Escobar. The New York Giants, the cloud that is hanging over them is this Victor Cruz contract situation. One thing I think, though, that will work in their favor is their owner, John Mara. The Maras have owned the Giants forever. Everyone knows this. But he's just such a steady presence, an optimistic presence, a positive presence in that organization because and I think their co-owners of the MetLife Stadium could learn a lot from them in this respect. They never let anything get outside the organization. Whenever Mara talks about the Victor Cruz contract situation, he puts a good face on it. He says that the talks are progressing, although he admits slowly, but they are progressing. They are in contact with Cruz and working towards a deal. I think you see this deal get done because I think Victor Cruz wants to be a Giant, and I think he's way too valuable to that team for them not to realize the value he brings. And I think you see a deal get done here with Cruz before the regular season starts. I think the only way this becomes a distraction is if every week during the actual season, every player is being asked about Victor Cruz's contract situation. Tom Coughlin's being asked about it every day. But I think the Giants are too smart of an organization to let it go that far. The Washington Redskins, they had their rookie. They're in the midst of their rookie camp, just like pretty much every other team, and they picked David Amerson, the cornerback from NC State, with their first pick of the draft in the second round. And Amerson was a polarizing draft prospect because he didn't have a good junior season at NC State, but he had a very good sophomore season. And the thinking is, if you're getting the guy who was a junior, you might be in trouble because, quite frankly, he got burned a lot. And he got burned a lot against competition that is not half as good as what he's going to face in the NFL. But Mike Shanahan comes away from the training camp enamored with him, saying he absolutely basically swallowed up the receivers at the rookie camp, which doesn't surprise me. But we'll see when Amerson is in that starting lineup. He's across from a Hakeem Nicks. He's across from a Victor Cruz. He's across from a Dez Bryant, a Miles Austin. Okay, guys like this, a Jeremy Maclin, a Deshaun Jackson. We'll see how he does then. It just makes me nervous if I'm a Redskins fan that this guy got flat out burned by receivers in the ACC, and he's coming to a division now where there's certainly top flight receivers on every team he's going to face. So I'm not as high on Amerson as certainly the Redskins are. I mean, what do you guys think of Amerson? Redskins fans especially. Do you guys see him as sort of an up-and-coming guy that you can count on? Because, again, with their secondary situation, they want him to play right away. So we'll see how that pans out. Going from the NFC East to the NFC South, the Chicago Bears, they took Kyle Long with the 20th pick in the draft. It's been sort of well discussed among Bears fans on my YouTube channel, Sports News Analysis, of, did they reach for Kyle Long? But then the other standpoint is, as fans, we complain they never take offensive linemen. They finally do, and people still have a problem with it. I thought they reached for Kyle Long. I thought it was maybe they jumped the gun a little bit. I thought initially maybe they could have gotten him maybe even in the second round. But you were seeing reports pick up steam that they weren't the only team interested in Kyle Long, that even the Packers, many people are saying, may have taken him with their pick at 26 if he was still on the board. So maybe he's a guy who it wasn't publicized and the draft nicks kind of missed it, but maybe he's a guy who was rising up boards and the Bears were smart to snatch him when they did. We'll see how he performs, but the Packers rumored to be interested in him as well as the Colts. So again, just a situation worth monitoring here. I'm sure Kyle Long will be scrutinized and judged here in his rookie year, but again, maybe he was more of a touted commodity than a lot of us thought. Going from the Bears to their rival, the Packers, and the Packers drafted 2 running backs, Eddie Lacy, Jonathan Franklin. They drafted 2 guys from UCLA, Jonathan Franklin and Dayton Jones. Jonathan Franklin won't be able to join the team until after June 14th because that's when UCLA ends their spring semester, if you will. I'm assuming they have adopted some sort of trimester academic calendar. That really only makes sense why they would end on June 14th. So Franklin won't be able to join them until after his graduation. And you ask, well, Dayton Jones is from UCLA. Why is he able, to join the team? Well, the fact of the matter is, as I just mentioned, Jones has already graduated from UCLA, so he's free to join the Packers right away. And will that hurt Jonathan Franklin in his quest for playing time in what is now, a crowded backfield there in Green Bay, obviously with the addition of both Lacy and Franklin to go along with the stable of running backs that they had on the team last year. An underwhelming stable of running backs, but a stable nonetheless. The Minnesota Vikings, Rick Spielman comes out today, and it's a shame general managers have to do this, but it's a part of the job. He said in an interview that, Christian Ponder had as much to do with the Vikings making the playoffs as Adrian Peterson did. And does a guy like Rick Spielman actually think that? Obviously not. Okay, you got a guy who rushed for 2,000 yards, put his team almost at the single-season rushing yardage mark, carried your team. There's no way he believes that, but he's got to put a good face on his quarterback. Ponder's a top 15 pick quarterback who isn't terrible, but by no means is above average, and this is a big year for Ponder. You heard Percy Harvin had problems with Ponder, and maybe that's why they ultimately decided to part ways with the star receiver. Whatever the situation was with that, Ponder's a guy who I'm sure he has the respect of some in that locker room, but he really needs to put his stamp on this team this year, a playoff team from last year that is certainly hoping to get back there, and we'll see how Ponder does here next season. The NFC South, moving into the Falcons. The Falcons drafted Levine Toilolo from Stanford. He was the second tight end this year, with Zach Ertz obviously being the main option out there in Palo Alto from a tight end standpoint. And Toilolo, where does he fit in this Falcons offense? I don't think he got drafted to be the heir apparent to Tony Gonzalez. I think he's more of a blocker and a red zone guy. Where I think he can be especially valuable, again, is in the red zone. Because they love going to Tony Gonzalez in the red zone. And Toilolo is so big and so physical that he's going to demand, and he can catch the ball now. He's not, when I say a blocking tight end, I mean he's probably a little bit better of a blocker right now than an elusive open field pass catcher. But you need to account for him in the red zone. I think maybe you see them use a little bit more 2 tight end sets in the red zone featuring Gonzalez and Toilolo. And again, just another added weapon and someone who I think will fit in good with Matt Ryan down there in Atlanta. The Carolina Panthers, Cam Newton is always going to be front and center here whenever you talk about the Panthers. And he's trying to lose weight. He came out today, although Newton has never had durability concerns, hasn't had injury concerns as an NFL player. He is trying to lose weight, okay? I think what Newton realized last year was, maybe he wasn't ready and come out and ready. He wasn't ready to play from day one, from Jump Street. and maybe that affected him. I think he figured it out halfway through the year. He had an excellent second half of the season. I'm expecting big things from him this year. I would have loved to see them get him a playmaker, either in free agency or in the draft, but they're going to try to squeeze another year out of, certainly, Steve Smith. They drafted Kenyon Barner. We'll see where he fits in. But, Newton taking the initiative to lose weight. There's been some rumors maybe he doesn't get along with people in the clubhouse, yeah, right. Locker room, I'm thinking baseball. In the locker room as much as he should. Maybe he comes out this year more from a leadership standpoint, and maybe this losing weight stuff is a step in that direction. The New Orleans Saints are moving to that 3-4 defense, right? So they got to get guys to fit that scheme. They draft Kenny Vaccaro. They pick up a nose tackle in the draft by way of John Jenkins. And Jonathan Vilma's a guy who sort of now his role is up in the air, because if you remember back at the beginning of Vilma's career, he played in a 4-3 defense under Herman Edwards. When Herman Edwards left, Eric Mangini came in and was going to switch to the 3-4 defense. It was thought then, when Vilma was pretty much almost in the prime of his career, he was a little bit younger at that point, that he didn't fit the 3-4 scheme, so they moved him. He ends up in New Orleans, is great on that defense, great on that Super Bowl winning defense. Of course, I missed all the Bounty Gate stuff. He was injured last year, but now that they're changing defenses, where does he fit? Does he fit? Look, I think you're going to see his role be as a situational nickel linebacker. I don't think he's going to be an every down 3-4 inside linebacker. I just don't think it fits his skill set whatsoever. I don't know what you guys think about that for Vilma, but those are just kind of my thoughts on it, that he wasn't good enough in a lot of people's eyes to play that position when he was in his prime. Why now, when he was injured all last year, didn't play last year, what makes you think now he can vault right into that scheme and be productive? I'm just not seeing it whatsoever. The last division here is the NFC West. The Arizona Cardinals, under a new program there with Bruce Arians, one of the constants you thought coming into Arians' tenure there was the play of Darrell Washington, the linebacker. Since Arians got there, could Washington make any worse of an impression on his new boss? In the span of a couple of months, Washington got suspended 4 games for violating the substance abuse policy, and he may now be suspended even further, stemming from his domestic violence arrest recently. And this is a shame because, Washington is a good player. I'm very high on him, but if he now misses, let's say, 6 to 8 games here, what is he going to be able to give the Cardinals this year? They obviously, at this point in the offseason, can't replace a guy like him who had over 100 tackles last year. From a leadership standpoint, who steps up on this defense now and assumes that responsibility? Just a mess all the way around for a guy with a lot of talent like Darrell Washington. You hope he can kind of turn things around and put his best foot forward out there in the desert. The Seattle Seahawks, again, solid roster from top to bottom that John Snyder has built. What you're going to see now is a lot of these top players that he's put together, their contracts will be coming up. They'll want to look to get extended. And the first one of those guys seems to be Brandon Browner. He's a restricted free agent after next year. And then looking ahead to 2014, Richard Sherman and Earl Thomas are going to be unrestricted free agents. The only way they're going to be able to keep all 3 of those guys is if one of those guys takes a hometown discount. And I think the only possibility you have of that happening is if you try to lock up Brandon Browner, a guy who came from the CFL, pretty much came out of nowhere, lock him up to a deal that is cap-friendly and that will not prohibit you from trying to sign Earl Thomas and Richard Sherman. Try to do it. Try to get him locked up, see if it works. Browner's only 27 years old. He's still in his prime. Give him however you have to structure that contract to get him in there, and it doesn't make it prohibitive to trying to sign Sherman or, of course, Earl Thomas. The last team today, guys, team number 32, the St. Louis Rams. not much going on with them guys. That's why I saved them for last. But Barrett Jones, you might remember him from Alabama, played 3 positions on the Alabama line for those championship teams, sort of well documented. He's not playing until training camp. He had Liz Frank surgery. He's probably slipped in the draft a little bit because of his injury concerns. I like Barrett Jones. I think he's a guy, top end for him, maybe not this year because of the surgery and the lingering injuries. I think this year he's a solid backup at center and guard. And I think in the future for him as a pro, I think he's eventually going to latch on with the Rams and be a mainstay at center or guard. This is a guy I think is going to acclimate himself well to the pro game. I think he's going to understand the complicated blocking schemes that go along with playing in the NFL. And he's a guy, I expect to be a steady presence for the Rams for a decade, obviously with the caveat of if he can stay, injury-free or at least most of the time injury-free. So, guys, that's your rundown around the league here. Again, all 32 teams every night right here on the Pro Football Podcast. And always interested in hearing what you think. So, again, at Pro Football Pod on Twitter, Pro Football Podcast at gmail.com on email. And, look, always interested in hearing from you. I know this is my first podcast here, sort of my maiden voyage, but feel free to jump in from, this point forward. We're going to end here with our trivia question. In the 1983 NFL Draft, there were 6 quarterbacks drafted in the first round. Dan Marino, the legend Dan Marino, was the 6th of those quarterbacks. Which 5 quarterbacks were drafted before him? And as a little bit of a bonus, in what order were they drafted in? Again, so who were the 5 quarterbacks drafted ahead of Dan Marino in the 1983 draft? And for bonus, what order were they drafted in? Guys, be sure to send me the answer to the trivia question if you know it. Be sure to check out and subscribe to get on my next podcast here, which will be tomorrow night. And again, let me know what you think of the show. Let me know some things you think I can tinker with or change or what have you. I'm going to try my best to get guests on here from this point forward. It might be a little bit harder as I'm sort of getting established here, but I'll certainly try my best to get a guest here. And I always have the guests on right in the leadoff spot, guys, right in the first quarter, if you will, of the show, right from the get-go. Thanks, as always, for listening, guys. And, again, check me out on Twitter and on email. Check me out on YouTube. At Sports News Analysis is the name of the channel. Almost 800 subscribers on there, so be sure to check those out. Thanks again for listening. You guys are great. Hey, hopefully this podcast was a good experience for you because, hey, I was a little bit nervous at first trying to do it, but, hey, it's not that bad. I think I did an all right job. Let me know what you guys think. Thanks again, and have a great night.